I made a box of my OPA stuff, and I have a list of all the things that I have in it so I don't put them in twice. And as you see, I have a few more pages because I'll put more stuff in. These are his glasses, which he wore.
I would say that he was put into a box of big productions, special effects, gorgeously detailed commercials, but I know for a fact that he wanted nothing else more than to do something new, to do something different, to walk around in Copenhagen with an Arriflex in his hand. And he always kept asking me, well, what new shall we do this week? And he loved the challenge.
1957, I did a commercial, the first commercial I ever did, the first television commercial I ever did with Fritz Spiess, with Robert Lawrence. We were shooting out at the old Meridian Studios out in the East End, and I don't remember who the director was, but I sure remember Mr. Spiess. He was an impressive figure, and to a 24-year-old kid, it was like working with God.
Fritz was up high on a big ramp, and I was seated down under the camera, and I'd never met him before. And the first thing he said to me was, "Put your pipe out." My pipe smoke was was becoming part of the shot, so I put the pipe out and heeled like a well-trained Labrador retriever, and thought, who the hell is this? Well, I found out later that found out in short order what a significant talent he was, and what a fine human being.
And I was talking to someone about maybe shooting some tests, getting a camera and shooting some tests on 35, because I was young and very full of ambition. Fritz came walking by, who I wouldn't have dared to approach. And he came up and he's rubbing his hands and he says, "Are you thinking of shooting some 8mm? Because I could help you." And here I was dreaming in major technicolor about getting a 35 camera and going out. He didn't even care. He just thought here was somebody who was interested in film, had a passion for it, which he obviously shared. And he didn't care what it was, but he wanted to help.
I don't think I'd met him before. We were Don Hall, Bob Rose and myself were in a station wagon on the way to Montreal to do a location shoot down there. And obviously, he and Bob knew each other. Don had not met him. I'm sure he hadn't. I certainly hadn't met him. So it wasn't like we all laughed and chortled together. Fritz had to get to know us. But as is wont on a long trip, there was, I can't remember, I don't even remember, there was a joke. I have no idea what the joke was. You know, who crossed the line, the chicken, that kind of stupid thing. Anyway, and Fritz was, you know, fine, sort of, with us, but he wasn't really joining in. Next day, I think it was at breakfast, he started to laugh. He broke up. And we looked at each other, and it was, I mean, what was all this about? Anyway, what we discovered is he had just realized what the joke was the day before. So we used to tease him unmercifully.
So after a number of years, I was fortunate in that Fritz asked me to be his key grip, and I worked as a key grip for him for about 9 years, I guess, at Schultz Productions. And, to say Fritz was an easy man to work for might be stretching the truth a little, but to say that he was probably the most sincere and honest man that I ever had the pleasure to work for probably isn't saying enough.
These are the little envelopes he put most of his stuff in. And he wrote a lot of his little notes to people on this kind of paper. He used this tape because he said to me a lot that it was the most stickiest, and it would stick a lot for stuff. He loved the feel of this brush, and he said I could have it. He used this magnifying glass, which he said was the most powerful.
1967 at TDF. It's when he joined TDF from RLP, and I was assigned as his coordinator, fortunately for me, because I learned a lot from him. In fact, the very first day we met was St. Patrick's Day, and he wore a green tie because he heard that the person he was working with happened to just be Irish, so that was his first compliment. And we worked together for 3 years. I worked with him for 3 years as his coordinator on all his projects. And I left to go overseas in 1970, and when I came back in 71, I rejoined TDF and worked with him again for another 3 years, and developed a really warm relationship with him and with his family. He was a wonderful friend.
I was hired as a prop stylist, and to renovate or to art direct a little bit of the Ronald McDonald House, and a sure sign of Fritz's gentlemanly manners came up right at the front. I was working away in the studio, he was working on another shoot, and I was trying to do this in the dark, and I asked a crew member to give me a hand moving this heavy thing, and with its real bricks and stones and real roof and mortar, it was very difficult to move. So this crew member informed me that, of course, this wasn't something that he did. This was not his job description. So needless to say, Fritz, who was working on another project, stopped everything and came over with the AC, moved it over to where there was light, and not only that, in Fritz's style, he lit it perfectly for me to continue my work.
And May 1st, I opened the doors, and there comes early in the morning that old Diesel putting up to the door, opens the trunk, and there's a whole load of equipment coming out of that trunk. All right, what does he want now? So he comes in the door, says, congratulations to the business, and I want to have all my equipment repaired. And I said, repaired or checked? He says, it doesn't really matter. Just go over it. I'm shooting a commercial, and I need everything in top shape. All right. So he turned around, he talked a little bit about this and that and everything else. And all of a sudden he pulls his checkbook out and writes a check and gives me the check. I look at the check and it says $1,000 on it. Now in '79, $1,000, especially when you start up, is money in the bank. You didn't need that much to live on for a couple of weeks. So I said, Fritz, checking the equipment costs you maximum $200 going over everything, A1 OK. I says, you're overpaying. No, he says, I'm not overpaying. I just want to have an account set up here. And from now on, I'm in the positive, and you go and shut up and go back to work. That was the man he was, and I haven't forgotten it. And today, I run an operation far bigger than it was at that time, but I'm mighty proud to have ever met Fritz, know Fritz, and worked with Fritz.
Over the years, he took a tremendous interest in Hugh's work, and Hugh took a great interest in his work, and they admired each other professionally, very much indeed. And unbeknownst to me, he'd collected almost everything that Hugh had done, photographs of his work, brochures he'd designed, and press clippings on him. And many years after Hugh died, he phoned me. And he was cleaning out his files or reorganizing them, and he asked me if I would be interested in getting this material. Well, I was totally thrilled. I was really thrilled for Ben and Tim, because I had kept some, but I hadn't got a complete set of Hugh's work. A lot of stuff had been lost along the way. So we met, and he gave it to me, and it was so thoughtful and kind. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't have bothered to keep a colleague's work, A, and B, you know, they come across it and they chuck it eventually in a few years. I mean, that's what people do. So I was very touched, and I never forgot that.
His shoehorn, which he used a lot, because his shoes, he didn't get the kind that he liked in his size anymore. He would write with this kind of pencil a lot. His cigarette case. Well, he would put a lot of his cigarette there, and he would put it in his coat pocket. His favorite dusting brush. He would dust a lot of the dust off, like in the TV room in my grandma's house. A little reel that we had in the play box, and he told me I could have it too.
Marilyn said, John, they've done it again. They're holding Larry O'Reilly or one of those guys at the airport, and we had an 8:30 shoot. So we finally freed him up. But I went to the office, and the first thing I did was look up Fritz's note and phone number. Called him up. I said, Fritz, can you come and see me? And he came in that day, and I hired him that day. And that was good news. The bad news, that I announced to everybody that we now had a Canadian cameraman. And they all said, well, you know, he's sick. I mean, come on. And so we had to promise them that if it didn't work out, we would shoot it again. That seemed to do it.
We used to have a rack over NC in that old Arabic blimp. In fact, I still have it here at Panavision up in the shelf. And I was one of the electricians on the set, and it used to be part of my job to hold the blimp up while he had racked the camera over and looked through it. And I think it was Chris Holmes that called me aside one day, and I forgot about the blimp, and it dropped down on Fritz's head. And we were talking about that when he was here at the open house, and he still has the bump. So.
When I first started working, and I was on set, and Fritz asked for a half an apple. And I gave him a half an apple, and he ate it. And about a week later, he took me through the equipment room and showed me what an apple box was. And that's when I realized what a gentleman he was, because he ate the apple.
A Sunkist commercial. And Fritz must have worked on picked one orange out of about 2,000. And for safekeeping, it went into the camera department, sitting there very quietly overnight. An Ortenberger came in the morning, and this is lovely orange sitting there. He thought, oh, nice, picked it up, started peeling it, and Fritz came in. And I don't know what Fritz said, but anyway, Ortenberger offered him a piece of orange now that it was open anyway.
Fritz had a good sense of humor, but if you told him a joke, he would laugh about an hour later. He had to think about it and probably translate. But way back at the Caldwell Studios, Gerhard Elson, Fritz, and myself were doing whatever we did at that time was everything. Gerhard and Fritz were taking lights off a rolling gantry that we had. Fritz was up on the gantry. Gerhard had a hold of the rope. So Gerhard looks up at Fritz and says, what if the light is heavier than me? And Fritz said, you will know immediately.
He walked in. I was so disappointed, you know. He was in a business suit. He had his briefcase with him and these glasses and this nice, attractive, normal man. I was so disappointed. So I said hello, and he was very gracious and very elegant, and he was very busy talking to people. And the next few days, every time he walked into the building, I happened to be sitting right in front of the door, he would trip. And I said, gosh, you know, for this well-respected man, he can't even walk straight. What's the matter with him? Well, for the third day in a row, finally he saw me looking hastily away as he tripped, and he said, I got you.
I, in fact, became a neighbor of his. I lived about 7 doors up from him at one point. And he invited my wife and children and I up for a barbecue one afternoon. And that's when I really discovered his personality. He was a very kind, open person. His family was very much the same. And I found that in this business, you could be a businessman and worry about what had to be done to get the job done. But when you went home at night, you reverted and became a family man, and you could understand what families and friendship was all about.
Well, he was the superstar. He was the man in Toronto that everybody seemed to admire, and who seemed to have taught everybody else in the industry at that time too, I think. And everybody was in a bit of awe of Fritz, I think, because he had such a reputation.
That he's just so well loved and remembered that he's left an indelible mark, certainly in our business and in my life, and I would like it to be perpetuated in all the new people who are coming along, to have some kind of affinity and respect for a Fritz that they were unfortunate enough not to have an opportunity to work with. So, thanks Fritz for the opportunity.
I was quite young in the industry, but he kind of pulled me aside and said, you know, it's not that difficult. Just kind of listen and watch, and you'll learn. And I did. And Fritz was absolutely a tremendous teacher and a professional. He was quite. Everyone knows how meticulous he is and what he brings to the party.
Very much like a father figure, especially at that time, because I was in my early to mid-20s, and he was someone who relaxed me so that I wouldn't be nervous in front of clients, and kind of held my hand, if that's the right expression, and really showed a lot of care, and became very excited as my future grew and my abilities grew with them. He was always someone who shared the excitement, really felt a part of that early growth period.
His favorite pen, and so he would write a lot of his sticky notes with a glass Undersetzer, which I made for him. That is his favorite color material. One of his expensive kinds of scissors, which he had a lot wherever he went. For example, up at our cottage. The gold wrapping paper he would use a lot for wrapping lots of gifts at Christmas or someone's birthday.
I'll start by saying that Fritz was a great friend, and I feel very privileged that I had the opportunity to work with Fritz through as many years as I did, which probably spanned about 12 or 15 years. So I was very fortunate, and more fortunate than those that didn't have the opportunity to work with him, because he was a gentleman. He was an incredible man of integrity, and it was just a joy to work with. He always challenged you, because he was meticulous. If anybody out there who knew Fritz will understand fully the fact that this man was a stickler for great detail and made us all really work hard at what we did for a living. So it was a pleasure to work with him, because it was always a challenge.
One of the jobs that I did from an editing point of view, we were doing a Carlsberg campaign, and we went across to Denmark to shoot some footage. And of course, at that time, you had to bring all the footage back and process it in Canada. And so Fritz felt, okay, let's process 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and then 2 for the odd roll, so that if we ran into any problems in the processing side of things, that we maybe had things covered. Well, the reality of it, what happened was either the odd rolls or the even rolls all got processed at off temperature. And so there we were, sitting with half the shoot with one sort of temperature and the other half at another temperature. And the differences were really quite small to the naked eye for the layperson. And it was an interesting process to have Fritz present things to the insurance company and explain to us why we should go back to Copenhagen to shoot something that we had images, but they were slightly different. And that obviously that precision and that attention to detail and that caring for the client and caring for his reputation and so on was just all part of his normal course of business and his normal life. It was really quite an education for a young editor at that time.
Yes, he was sort of he was a perfectionist, that he wanted certain things, and invariably it would take a long time to achieve this. It doesn't magically happen in a very short space of time. I wasn't objecting to it because the meter is running. So if he went into a late shoot, I would say, well, I'm a full supporter of perfection. Yes, no matter how long it takes, do it right. Yes.
You know, God is in details, and Fritz is there, and he was certainly into details, and that's his legacy. He gave detail to all of us, and I think it's one of my strengths to look after detail at my work. And every now and then I think about, you know, all the things he made us do where sometimes we thought, well, is that really necessary? Well, of course, in retrospect, it was necessary, you know, so that's basically it. It's not just a German thing, I think it's an artistic thing.
The assistant prior to me on staff at Schultz was a jacket and tie. And when I first got to Schultz Productions, I thought, well, I'm not actually a jacket and tie kind of guy. Not that I have a problem with it, but I thought, well, if they want that, he never once asked for me to be anything but myself. And this was another thing. People, I asked him once after about a month, I said, Fritz, you know, do you require, he's, no problem, he didn't care. What he cared about is your integrity, your personal interest, your professional attitude, and your passion for what you do was there. The rest of it was superficial to him.
His Aqua Velva aftershave that he used a lot when I stayed there, and so in the bathroom it would smell like that a lot.
And then what we did was we shot the jungle in Florida, and I thought we were going to Florida to actually use real jungle, but just as we approached the real jungle and we're checking out various angles, Fritz says, this is not going to work. I mean, we're in the middle of the real jungle. Fritz says, it ain't going to work. He says, what we have to do, he says, I remember a thing they did in the last days of Marienbad. He says there was a track that was built and it went 180 degrees. And he says, that's what we have to do. We have to control the environment. We're going to build the track. We're going to build the jungle. We're going to build the angles. And then we hydraulically lifted this thing out of the jungle, and it was wonderful, and it flew through the air, and we did the flying shots over at the island airport, etc. And it became a really stimulating visual, and of course this was a classic example of his ability to bring lots to the production and make us lowly writers look pretty good.
Fritz was always the consummate professional gentleman. I don't know anybody else like him. I was always appreciative of everything that he taught me. And he taught me a lot. He taught everybody a lot, as a matter of fact. He taught them not only about filmmaking, he taught them how to behave. And I think we've lost a little of that.
So he was the quiet man. I learned later, years later, that he had quiet power, but he never used power. Never threw it around. The director would be off somewhere chatting with somebody, and of course we'd say, why are we waiting, the old line. And Freddie would be talking with Fritz because he had the hugest respect for Fritz and his work, and Fritz called the shots, literally, and he'd set them all up and have everything absolutely right. And if it wasn't absolutely right, Fritz wouldn't even turn on the camera.
When Fritz came to this country and began commercials and started with the older technology of black and white and some of the earlier color motion technologies, that what he's done today is he's seen us through many years and many generations of films, and again help us push that envelope to make sure that we're delivering not just to him but to his peers, to make sure his craft had the best in class, the best in the business could offer, and we appreciated that.
It was always Mr. Spiess to me. He was the man behind the camera. It was a kind of a fascination. It was the man in charge, sort of like the silent master. And he was the pinnacle in those days. He was just totally in control.
Fritz was the eternal student and the master teacher. He never stopped the study of film and he never stopped teaching the art of film.
He left me. He left me with, oh geez, I can't even, I don't want to, I'll cry. I don't want to. He left me with the knowledge that there are people like him, you know, in this industry. You don't find them, but I know that they exist because he was who he was.
Cardboard. You probably wouldn't understand it that well, but he showed me one day how to bend cardboard because I didn't know how to, and I just wanted to put that in there because it's one of the memories of what he taught me. His favorite lighter, which he had a lot of kinds of. A red pen, which he wrote a lot of his yellow sticky pads on. The Emerald Cal candies that he let me have a lot of, and he would always get special boxes of them. His Canada eraser, which he gave me a twin eraser of. My brother and I's present to him for Christmas, and his comb and case, which he used a lot to comb his hair, and he had it in his little coat pocket there, vest. A Q-tip, which he used a lot. Pencil sharpeners, which this thing when I came to his house, he would always have very sharpened pencils, and he would only use the blue kinds, and this is the one that he always used. You can see it was a bit rusted there because he used it a lot. Oh yeah, liquid paper, which if I made a mistake on my homework in pen or something, he would always tell me that you can't just leave it, you have to erase it. And yellow sticky pads, which he used a lot. When we cleared up his desk when he passed away, we found a whole sticky pads. There was like 2 layers of them on his desk. And clips, which he let me use a lot, and I really like these. And I'm definitely gonna have more.
In the last year or so, Fritz did not like to drive too much at night, and I think his eyes were getting bad or something, whatever. But and John Holosko and myself used to take turns in picking him up, and I would pull him up in front of the house, and Fritz would stick his hand out and wave that he was coming, and then he would come out, and Fritz always had a briefcase. In fact, sometimes he even had 2 briefcases, and he would come out with his briefcase and get himself organized and in the car and get the briefcase open, and we would head off downtown. And out would come notes and letters and the sort of things that we were going to discuss that evening as far as the CSC. Or what about this, and what about this for this award, because Fritz was very involved in our past awards.
I guess my major thrill, which I was not aware of until after it happened, was last year at the CSC Awards when I went there to present an award, only to find that Marilyn Stonehouse and my wife and Fritz had collaborated in presenting an award to me, which I will always remember. I think of it as the Fritz Spiess Award, not the CSC Award. And I'm most grateful to Fritz for that.
Because I think the one thing everyone says to me is just how many things Fritz had done for different people without really ever telling anyone or anyone else noticing. You know, there's so many people he's helped out in their career, and no one knows that. I'm sure that a lot of that information died with him, because it really is a piece of our history who's died, and that's hard. It's really hard.
One thing that I did want to say was that through my experiences with him over the 15 years that I worked really close, was that I learned a different side about him. Forget about the business side. I mean, everybody knows that side. My feeling was, and I have a lot of respect for my own father, but aside from my own father, if I was to pick a father, Fritz was the man, an incredible human being. and we're all poorer for the loss of such a great man. That's how I feel. I left the TDF to a lodge. I bought a lodge up north, and Fritz gave me a letter of recommendation. And according to his wife, he spent hours putting this together over the set to put in it, well, how he felt towards me. And it really did a lot for me. You know, he was with me all the time, whatever I did.
When I first met Fritz, I was very, very, very young, very inexperienced because we had no training here for actors. I didn't have a National Theatre School. I came straight out of high school into television and into film. And to meet Fritz Spiess and to work with him and to be nurtured by him, to be able, he's so approachable. He's so loving and so professional, efficient, perfectionist. And I remember the first time I saw myself on the screen, I realized it wasn't about me, it was about Fritz. Because what Fritz did for me was magic. And he gave me confidence in his excellence and his charm and his fun. He was witty and funny and comfortable. And oh, he's just a wonderful man.
I still remember the words of that first O'Keeffe pool that we shot together in Puerto Rico. A man wants to get the most out of life. And sometimes you have to break away, take a chance, try to do something you've never done before. That's what life's all about. And that's what Fritz was all about. Always striving for perfection, to be in his profession the best that anyone could ever be. As his old friend Carl Holman would say, cheers, Fritz, and thanks.
What's the best lesson you ever learned from your granddad?
I think the best thing I learned from him is that if you still have something that you haven't finished, you should always get it finished. And well, one of the things that we had a lot together was I made him tea at night, and I would always say goodnight to him, like, "Good Nacht, my Hetzel," and stuff like that. And we would always have like Naza, where we would play with our noses. And I have a lot more memories, but I can't say them all now.